Hi everyone, today we're going to dive into effective actions and have a look at what it means to have an inclusion and an exclusion in an effective action, as well as looking at some of the possible set operations that you can perform on effective actions. So we're going to start off with a very simple policy, a single allow and deny, and the deny is denying a subset of what is allowed. So we're allowing every S3 star action, but we're going to deny every S3 get star action. So we're going to start off by converting this into PolicyShards to get the effect of the PolicyShards. And now we've got those effective shards, we can print them out and see what they look like. So we've ended up with a single policy shard, and it has one effective action, as policy shards always do, which has an inclusion of S3 star and a single exclusion of S3 get star. It's probably easiest to explain this looking at a Venn diagram. We started off with an allow that was S3 star, so we've got a Venn diagram here which is green for allow and is S3 star, and then we effectively punched a hole in that with the deny that was S3 get star. So the bit that's allowed is still just this green portion here of everything that's S3 star, but is not S3 get star. To illustrate how this works in more detail, let's delve into the difference operator on effective action. And we can do that by taking the shards that we had before we found the PolicyShards effect, and we've got the allow is the first one, and the deny is the second one. Let's just double check that works as expected. Yeah, so we can see here that gives us effective action S3 star, so we can get just the effective action by looking at the effective action attribute on the allow policy shard, and then we can get the same for the deny. So these are just the original policy shards that were split out from the statement before the effective permissions were calculated. So this mirrors exactly what we have in the statements here. And the way that PolicyGlass calculates those effective permissions is by performing a set operation called difference on the allow shard. And what that means is it's essentially subtracting the deny shard from the allow shard. So let's see what that looks like. And if we comment out these two prints for now, we can see that that gives us exactly what we got from the PolicyShard effect function. Now let's take this effective action and use it to illustrate what happens in more complex scenarios. So what happens when you calculate the difference between a larger effective action and a smaller effective action with an exclusion. So if we delete everything that we've got so far and just import effective action and action, then let's make this effective action B, and then we have an effective action A that is just S3 star. And to make this one smaller, let's make the inclusion get star and the exclusions get object specifically. Okay, so what's going to be the difference between these two? As effectively what we're doing is we're trying to subtract S3 get star from S3 star, but not subtract S3 get object from it. Let's have a look, see what happens. We end up with two effective actions. one which is S3 star except get star, and one which is S3 get object with no exclusions. To understand how that makes sense, it's a good idea to look at the Venn diagrams again. We started off with S3 star as our shard A, and then we applied shard B to it, which excluded S3 get star, but shard B didn't exclude S3 get object. So you can see we have two rings here that represent our inclusions, the S3 star and the S3 get object. We need to exclude every S3 get star except S3 get object. And with an effective action that is only an include and an exclude, there's no way of representing this sort of nested inclusion. And you wouldn't want to, because it would just end up getting far too complicated to understand what this meant on a single policy shard. So what we do instead is split it out into two policy shards. One which is S3 star except get star, and one which is just S3 get object. And by doing that, it becomes a lot easier to understand, because each one of these actions would then get split out to a separate policy shard. So you would end up with two policy shards, because each policy shard can only ever have one effective action. And the first policy shard would allow S3 star except get star, and the second policy shard would allow S3 get object. It's quite difficult to illustrate the scenarios in which this calculation happens, because it usually happens when conditions are involved. And that is a topic for another video. Hopefully that's given you some idea of how effective permissions are calculated using PolicyGlass with respect to actions. In the next video, we're going to talk about how this applies when conditions are involved, and that's when life gets complicated. See you then!